Yeah, welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. It's clear that Nottingham Forest are the real deal this season. So can they hold on and qualify for the Champions League next season? And is their success down to the system or their raft of standout players? All right, with us today, we have the Athletic's Nick Miller and our Forest writer Paul Taylor, who were both at the City Ground at the weekend. Now, gents, talk to me. This season, Forest have beaten Liverpool. Only team still to beat Liverpool this season at Anfield, and Manchester United, Tottenham, and even put 7 past Brighton. Was Saturday's result the pick of the bunch, do you reckon? Let's start with you, Nick.
I still think that maybe this is the age that I am, but I still think beating Liverpool away was the pick of them, given that Forest haven't done that for so long. But yeah, Saturday was extraordinary, and it coming at a point where the performances had not quite tailed off, but there were sort of slight worrying signs, and then I think it was not just beating Man City. Man City had a lot of possession, as they always do, but it was kind of they felt like Forest were in control of it as well. But yeah, in terms of where all these results lie, beating Liverpool away is, even though I was there on Saturday but wasn't there at Liverpool, is going to take some beating.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, I agree with Nick. Anfield just felt like a line in the sand that was beyond this season. It was a historic win. It was something that they'd been waiting for a very long time. And this season has been one that's full of landmarks and full of little moments that make you think Forest are definitely on a upward trajectory, and the Man City win was definitely one of those. It just underlined everything that was so very Foresty about the identity that Nuno was given them. That it epitomised everything that's made them good this season. So in that sense, the beating Man City was another landmark in that it just underlined how good Forest now are at what they do.
Yeah, this brings me on to my next point, really, because, Forest hadn't won in the Premier League since the 7-0 win against Brighton. It was a massive win, but, we'd all been talking about perhaps we're going to start seeing a bit of a drop-off, and we sort of saw that in many respects. But in your match briefing on The Athletic, you described the win, Paul, over Manchester City as a massive demonstration of intent. Did it also show, basically, how resilient this team is in the race for Champions League football in many respects?
Yeah. I think on a very basic level, there was just a mathematical point to it all, in the sense that Forest could have ended the day in fifth and on a pretty much a bit of a low following the results that had gone before. It would have underlined the sense that there was a bit of a blip happening. Now, what they did instead was go out and beat one of their main rivals for Champions League qualification, and do it in a way that reminded people of what has made Forest a success. It kind of, if there had been any doubts about whether their formula was sustainable or about whether their formula was starting to stutter and they needed to find a new way of doing things, I think it just emphasised the point that even against a kind of semi-resurgent Manchester City side, it could still work, and it could still it can still be an effective way for Forest to get through these last 10 games and hopefully get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, I want to talk to you guys about the standout players. Look, Forest have had a few this season, and I think you need those kind of performances from certain players to really be where they are this season in the league. But I'm just going to start and say Murillo, for me, has just been an absolute godsend, absolute stunning player. And not just that, the amount of money they picked him up for and what he's probably worth now is really, really good business. So, Nick, give me two or three for you that really blow your mind. And Chris Wood as well, actually, I must add to that.
All right, you're taking all the players now. Give us a few. I think we could, you could go through the whole team, and Matt Sells has been amazing in goal. Aina was incredible. He's had a few iffy performances recently, but was incredible at the weekend. Milenkovic, amazing centre partner for Murillo at the back. Nico Williams isn't a left back, but he's been brilliant at left back for most of the season. I think there is a danger of slightly overthinking it, though, because the best player, not just in this team, but one of the maybe the best player, the most naturally talented player anyway that I've seen play for Forest in my lifetime, is Morgan Gibbs-White. And again, he was unbelievable at the weekend. And the thing about Gibbs-White is that I think most of us thought that when he signed, we would be getting a kind of a creative number 10 who, would play on the wing sometimes and would do the sort of things that creative number 10s do. But he's a kind of complete midfielder as well as that. Like at the weekend, he played basically in the middle of a 4-4-2, and he was better than any of Manchester City's midfielders. There are moments when he's kind of slightly frustrating when he chooses not to play like a simple pass. He tries something sort of eye-catching and extraordinary about sort of 60-70% of the time, but a lot of the times it comes off. So, he's just an absolute pleasure to watch, and we will kind of enjoy him while he's still there. But yeah, there have been loads of... the whole first team basically has been brilliant this season, but Gibbs-White is an unbelievable player.
Yeah, what do you reckon?
I think I can only join the love letter to Morgan, I'm afraid. I think his numbers are only like 5 goals and 6 assists, but which is pretty good numbers, to be fair. But he's so much more than that. He's just somebody who can drive the team forward. The way he carries the ball 20 30 yards in a heartbeat, or the way the pass he played for Callum Hudson-Odoi for the goal.
Yeah, for the goal. Yeah, stunning, wasn't it? Yeah.
He makes it look easy. And when you see it again and you watch it, and I have watched it a few times because it's a beautiful thing to watch, it's just outstanding. To see the pass and to play the pass, and it goes right to his feet. It doesn't just loop in a gentle arc. He somehow manages to play a long pass with a bit of pace on it, so he gets the ball quickly. And that's what he's capable of. He's capable of opening teams up in a variety of different ways. And he's quite a charismatic character as well. He's not your typical pounding on your chest, screaming at players kind of leader, but he does kind of epitomise everything that's good about this Forest side. He's a great, wonderful player to watch. I'd also echo Nick's comments on Milenkovic. He somehow has made Murillo an even better player. The two of them just have attributes that meld so well together and make them a perfect pairing. Milenkovic, he can pass, he's confident on the ball, but more than that, he's just an old-fashioned defender. He wins headers. I wouldn't fancy playing against him as a striker because he's such a imposing figure. And the other one I'd mention is Elliot Anderson. I think Newcastle knew they'd got a special player on their hands, and they didn't really want to sell him. I mean, we can have a whole conversation about PSR and the merits or otherwise of that, but the fact that Forest were able to benefit from that and let's be frank, get Odi Vlachodimos out the door for a vast amount of money is probably one of the best deals they've ever done, without exaggeration. To get Elliot Anderson for the money they did and get Vlachodimos out the door and solve their PSR issues at the same time was an outstanding piece of business. And now they've got a player who's, not only one of the best players in the Forest ranks, but might well be on the verge of England reckoning. So, what a deal that was.
Well, that's a good question, actually, to sort of go into, really, is the England conversation, and which players in this team, Nick, do you think could be called up for the England squad? I mean, Hudson-Odoi for me has been really, really fascinating. A player that we saw as a bit part player at Chelsea. I don't think his ability has ever been in question, but I don't know, there's a bit more finesse to him here at Forest at the moment. Maybe that's down to Nuno, maybe that's down to the environment, but surely he's got to be in for a shout.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, you kind of wonder whether... I'm not really sure whether his previous relationship with Thomas Tuchel will be a good or a bad thing for him, really. But, if you're going purely on performances, he's... him and Anthony Elanga they can come in and out of games, and they can have quiet games, but they're wingers. That's what happens. But yeah, he's been brilliant on either flank as well, which I think is kind of... Last season, his sort of signature move was... And signature move is one of kind of the only way he scored goals, really. He was cutting in from the left-hand side and sort of curling one to the far corner. It was like a sort of mirrored Iron Robben thing. But this season he's been playing on the right a little bit more. He scored the goal on Saturday from the right-hand side. So he's pretty adaptable as well. But yeah, I mean, I as Paul said, I think Elliot Anderson will consider himself pretty unlucky if he doesn't get an England call up at some point in the next few months. He's been unbelievable. He's one of the kind of it's him and someone else in midfield for Forest, and And there's another one that when he signed, I think Forest. We kind of thought, well, what are we signing here? Is because he's played a lot out on the wing for Newcastle. Have we kind of bought just a sort of a depth option on the wing? Is he going to play number 10? What does this mean? Are we selling Gibbs White? But he's turned into one of the best kind of number 8s in the division, which is, maybe we didn't see coming, but is just exceptional.
It was probably the injuries to Danilo and Ibrahim Sangare that gave him an opportunity in midfield, and now they're both back fit, and because of his form, they're kind of among the crop of players fighting for one place alongside him. Anderson's been absolutely brilliant. I think he is the most likely, along with Morgan, to get a call up. Whether it happens this time, I think he should. Whether it'll happen, I don't know, because there's a lot of competition in that area. But Callum Hudson-Odoi, I think I'm right in saying Tuchel is the one that let him go out on loan at Chelsea. So
yeah.
I'm not sure that he, at that point, was particularly high on his list of players that he liked, but things change, don't they? He might be looking at him now and thinking what a great job he's doing for Forest, so who knows? But I think there might be, I'm not sure that historic relationship might on this occasion help him greatly, but we'll see. Isn't it great, though, for Forest fans to be able to have this conversation about which of their players could be in the England reckoning? It's been so long since that was even a conversation. It's incredible, and it's just a sign of the journey they've been on in the last few seasons.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the business Forest have done, actually. And you mentioned Sangare there, who's barely played, actually, and actually top player on his day. Who do you think represents the most value in terms of how much they bought them for and how much they potentially could sell them for? And when teams do well and you see players operate at the top level, you do know those data analysts are looking at it going, well, maybe we could squeeze them in at Arsenal, maybe we could squeeze them in here or there. I mean, who are you most afraid might leave, and who do you think has posed the best value, Nick?
Well, who I'm afraid will leave is the kind of easy question. It is Gibbs White. They will have some kind of plan. I think one plan might be to just move Anderson forward if Gibbs White does go, but you're not going to replace him really. There's no one around that will feasibly come to Forest. I don't think that will kind of compare to him in terms of value. I mean, that the right side on Saturday was Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ola Aina, which cost about 3 million quid between them. Aina was this kind of free signing as a bit of an afterthought. There was in the first sort of 18 months, Forest seemed to be addicted to signing right backs, and it was just like, well, okay, another one. Do we really need this guy? And he, at the time, it looked like he was behind Nico Williams, and I can't remember. I think they had signed Gonzalo Montiel after that, but Sergio Aurier was there and done really well in that.
Aurier,
yeah, exactly.
Those days, yeah,
but Aina has just been exceptional, and he plays. I think he played a fair bit on the left hand side last season, but he's been first choice at right back for all of this season, and as a free signing, he's just been incredible. I mean, the whole back four really at the moment. Nico Williams cost about 16, 17 million quid, something like that. But Milenkovic was about 12 million, and I assume whoever only asked for 12 million quid for him at Fiorentina has been fired by now, because that was just, I mean, it's just a ludicrous amount of money. Murillo was a little bit less than that. So
I think it's like 11 million from Brazil.
So you've and then Matt Sells wasn't particularly expensive either. So they've put a back four together for what, about 30 million quid, something like that, maybe a bit 35, 40 million quid, which is, I mean, that is absolutely nothing for that amount of players in today's market. So yeah, in terms of value, I think Ola Aina and Hudson-Odoi have just been incredible.
Yeah, Murillo's interesting, isn't he, Paul, in terms of picking him up for next to nothing, but also a player that barely played much football. I mean, that's a massive gamble, but it's a gamble that's looked like it's paid off.
Yeah, and in all seriousness, he could end up being one of the world's most expensive defenders. I don't think it's an exaggeration to put him in that bracket. They could sell him for 70, 80 maybe even more £1 million. Yeah, who knows what the market's at this point? But he is everything. He's a central defender that you get excited to watch. And how many central defenders can you say that about? When he's on the team sheet, you think, great, I'm going to get to see Murillo today. Because he always does something, whether it's a little pirouette of a turn on the box, a 40-yard shot, a goal line clearance. He's an exciting player. And he's also, amid it all, a very, very good central defender. You watch his performances, and even when sometimes he'll find himself, I can't remember which game it was, but there was a game where he found himself one-on-one with an opposition striker, and it looked for a minute as though the striker was going to outpace him, and you just felt relaxed because you knew what he was going to do. And he made it look so easy. He just guided them out to the side of the pitch, and the chance just went. And it was just because he kept his head. He knew not to dive in. He knew he'd got the pace and strength to see them out into a less dangerous area. And that's what he brings. He's an exciting player that also happens to be a very, very good central defender. And I think Forest fans and, even the journalists covering the club should enjoy him while he's there, because he's a joy. He's brilliant. He's great. He's a proper Brazilian.
He's a proper Brazilian. I don't know what an unproper Brazilian is, but we'll take it. All right, let's move on. Next, we'll discuss how this group of players at Forest works from a tactical standpoint. Okay, let's bring in Ahmed Walid, one of our tactics writers, but also one of the men with the greatest microphones in podcasting. Ahmed, so good to have you with us. Look, how much of the story of the success of Forest this season has come down to their tactical approach under Nuno. I mean, really sturdy, a team that works really hard, and a team that is actually very disciplined. How often now does Nuno's system rely on possession, but also can you explain his tactical outlook as well?
Yeah, Forest have had the lowest possession in the Premier League this season. But the thing is, there's a look about a downward look towards team who defend. And I think that's wrong in football, because actually defending is really hard. And doing it masterfully, as Forest have done this season, is even harder. So it's fine that Forest are playing this way with only 40% possession, which is the lowest in the league. They are organized without the ball. They are winning the duels. They are hitting on the counter, sometimes playing long balls to Chris Wood and seeking the second ball. But it's fine because it suits the profiles of the players. It suits Murillo, it suits Milenkovic, it suits Aina, it suits Callum Hudson-Odoi and Elanga on the counter, it suits Wood winning the aerial duels. So the most important thing a coach should do is actually playing a system or a style that suits the players. And the second thing is, it's not only that. So Forest sometimes actually have the ball. They try to attack down the flanks through Callum Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, with Gibbs White trying to attack the pockets and position himself between the lines.
Okay, interesting. Paul, you wrote a match piece aptly named "Being Nuno'd." What Ahmed's just said, does that lend to your explanation of being Nuno'd and how he actually constructs his team and how they execute on the pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. They are so finely honed at what they do. I think they take huge pride in the defensive strength that they've got. They give away very few chances. At home, certainly, I think they've conceded 10 goals all season. Remarkable given where they were. Matt Sells has kept 12 clean sheets, which I think is the joint most of any club in the division. They just don't give away chances. They don't give away goals. Yes, there's a certain level, not of negativity, but they do things defensively when they're out of possession, but that's fine. Why not? You're up against some of the best players in the world, and if you can find a way to keep them out and then still have this huge threat on the counter-attack, then why not? Nuno was very interesting when at the start of the season, he talked about how he shaped a team, and he didn't arrive with any preconceived ideas of how he wanted his Forest team to play. He looked at the resources he inherited, at the players he's got, and then came up with the best way of utilising those. So in his mind, he's seen the players that he's got and come up with this counter-attacking style that's worked brilliantly. It's not like he arrived with a managerial ethos that he's always had. I guess there is always going to be a certain level of similarity between this Forest team and the Wolves team he had, for example. But it wasn't like he put the cart before the horse. He looked at what tools he'd got at his disposal and then came up with a plan afterwards. And what a plan it is. I don't think there's many teams in the Premier League that utilise the resources they've got as efficiently and as effectively as Nottingham Forest do.
Yeah, Nick, I'm just thinking about his time at Spurs, at Tottenham Hotspur, and how a lot of those fans really wanted a different type of style, a bit more elegant, a bit more attacking. Does that matter to Spurs fans? Because does that matter to Forest fans? Sorry, I should say. Because I'm just thinking about Jose Mourinho's glory days at Chelsea. Right, sometimes that football wasn't great, but they got the results. And actually, even with Nuno here at Forest, you're still seeing matches like 7-0 against Brighton. Surely they're happy with what they're looking at, as long as they're getting the results, as long as they potentially get Champions League football next season.
Yeah, well, I think it was a concern when he was appointed. Anyone who's going to follow Steve Cooper was going to have a tricky job, because he was such a kind of hero with the fans. And there were a couple of what possibly slightly sexier names mentioned when Nuno was appointed. I think Oliver Glasner was mentioned and a couple of other people, but obviously it certainly doesn't matter now. And there is a kind of, I think there is an idea that it's not possible to play kind of exciting football or football that people want to watch unless you are playing a certain way. And that, Nuno obviously got tagged as being a kind of slightly dour manager partly from his time at Spurs. But I mean, I can tell you from kind of personal experience, this Forest team are incredibly exciting to watch when they play those kind of rapid counter attacks, and you got Ilanga streaking down the right hand side and Gibbs White moving the ball quickly and playing those unbelievable passes. So it is the kind of perfect blend between the solid defence that Ahmed has just talked about and that kind of incredible attacking verve, if you like.
Yeah, Ahmed, I just want to delve more into this defensive organisation, because you highlighted the role of players like Alanga and Gibbs White in blocking passing lines. Now, this season, you've also written about the flexibility Nuno has tactically for his team to do from a defensive structure into a transitional structure on the counter.
Yeah, because the thing is, Forest aren't only defending in a 4-2-3-1 with Gibbs White behind Wood all the season. They changed their approach without the ball, depending on the opposition as well. So we actually saw on Saturday, they moved to a 4-4-2 without the ball, with Ilanga and Wood up front. And Gibbs White in the middle with Nicolas Dominguez on the right. So the thing is, you had Nicolas Dominguez and Morgan Gibbs White dropping, like Dominguez to press Gvardiol and Gibbs White dropping to mark Phil Foden. And the thing is, having Ilanga up front gave them like a better opportunity on the counter, because instead of Ilanga actually dropping next to Ola Aina and, for example, marking Doku, they had him all the way up front, and actually Dominguez was playing on the right. And we've seen these changes throughout the season. Like, for example, the most common tweak that Nuno does is when Forest are seeing out the lead, he brings on Morato and actually moves to a back five. And another thing is that throughout the season, like before the Brentford game, I think it was in December, like Forest hadn't played an out-and-out back three from the start of the game, except in the Carabao Cup in the game against Newcastle. But in the Premier League, they hadn't played it before from the beginning of the game. They actually did, and I felt that they surprised Brentford, and the overloads out wide from Nicky Williams and Aina helped them like take the lead. And there are many more examples of this. For example, the 7-0 win that Nick was talking about against Brighton, like lots of those goals are on the transition, but in the beginning of the game, especially like the third goal, you can see that they were playing in a 3-5-2 on the ball, but actually Ilanga was moving to the right side to overload that side with Gibbs White and Ola Aina, and they caused problems to Mitoma and Tariq Lamptey. So all these like small changes give Forest an advantage on top of their organization.
Yeah, Paul, tactically astute, changing in particular for particular games? It sounds like, Nuno has really thought about what he wants to implement at Forest. Maybe some might say even learnt from previous mistakes. But I was looking at Opta. Opta did this really interesting set of graphics about the match at City, against City, and basically looked at how Forest soaked up the pressure in the first half and then went for it in the second half. That type of game management and that type of discipline surely has to be attributed to why this team has done so well this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did have a smile there when Ahmed mentioned Morato coming on. So that has become a kind of symbol of the season in some ways. When Forest are ahead and you see Morato warming up on the touchline, you kind of know which way the game's going. And again, he's probably the one player in the Forest squad that can make Milenkovic look a bit small. He's an absolute unit of a man. He's really an imposing figure. And again, another one that they found from, not obscurity, but another really good signing that you wonder why perhaps other Premier League clubs weren't looking at him either. But yeah, the Forest's approach was probably symbolised by that game at Liverpool, where they did openly set out their stall to keep things tight for 60, 70 minutes and then bring on Elanga and Hudson-Odoi and attack a tiring Liverpool team, and it worked perfectly. And that's an example of Nuno's tactical astuteness. I think in press conferences, he's quite interesting, because if you ask him who he wants to sign in January or where he wants to strengthen, he'll bat it off. He doesn't have any interest in talking about that. But if you ask him about his tactical approach or why he wants to do this or that or the other, a particular nuance of his team, he will open up a little bit and he'll talk about it. He clearly has a great enthusiasm for the finer details of the game. And I think that shows in the way he does have all these. He always has a plan, always has a little something he's going to change for each particular game. It's never quite identical. There's always something that he's picked up that he thinks he can exploit in the opposition side. And that without a doubt has been one of Forest's strengths this season. His adeptness and intelligence of just finding something that he can exploit to Forest's advantage.
Yeah. Before you go, Ahmed, I just want to talk about long-term success for Forest, because Forest's ability to capitalise on high press turnovers and their improved set-piece performance have been notable improvements this season. Is that key to where you see Forest going if they're going to compete at the highest level? Is to manage all that?
Yeah, and I think a more important point is actually to have the profiles of the players that are good at this. So obviously last season, Forest were a shambles from set pieces offensively and defensively. Like defensively, they had the most conceded goals from set pieces in the league with 23 goals. And even when you factor in equal opportunity by dividing the number of goals with the number of set pieces they conceded, they were still the worst in the league. Now their offensive and defensive numbers in terms of goals per 100 set pieces have improved, and also in the underlying numbers as well in terms of like expected goals per 100 set pieces. So when you look at this season, they have the 6th best goals per 100 set pieces in the league and the 4th best XG per 100 set pieces. So this is offensively. And defensively, they have the 7th lowest goals conceded per 100 set pieces and the lowest XG conceded per 100 set piece in the whole league. And a big part of this is the players, because they brought Milenkovic, who's really good in the aerial duels, and actually, in addition to Gibbs White's delivery, also Elliot Anderson's delivery has been really good from set pieces. But it's not only the players, it's also having better organization, better routines, marking the opponents better, knowing what the opponents want to do. So it's important how they're gonna keep the players or replace them, because as like Nick and Paul were speaking earlier, if Gibbs White, for example, leaves, and that's the biggest fear, how can you replace him with someone who has the same delivery at set pieces and someone who's really good on attacking transitions, not only in terms of finding the pass but actually carrying the ball and dribbling with it forward. Same goes to Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, for example.
Okay, fantastic. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And next time you come, I want some strobe lights in the background just to aid that microphone in the foreground. Maybe some trance music as well, just to keep the vibes going. You're a legend. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Well, Nick, no one can question how good Forest have been this season. But, with 10 games left, what kind of challenges do you think this team could face in terms of trying to maintain that Champions League qualification?
Well, I mean, there's a few tricky fixtures left. Got Villa in a couple of weeks. And I suppose one thing could be juggling the FA Cup with that. It's got Brighton away in the quarterfinals, and then quite a rapid turnaround to Manchester United at home a few days later. So there's that. One thing could be there's been. It's quite difficult to pick out weaknesses in Forest this season, but one thing has been there's definitely a plan for when they take the lead. Not quite so much of an effective plan for bringing things back when they go behind. I think they've only won one game after going behind. I think it was Aston Villa at home just before Christmas. So there are things like that, and there's obviously injuries that could occur between now and the end of the season. All that said, I've kind of gone. I'm all in now. I'm a kind of. There's no. In my mind, there's absolutely no way that Forest aren't going to get qualified for the Champions League, which is clearly an absurd state of affairs. Considering the expectations at the start of the season, and B, for my own mental well-being, I should be. I'm just setting myself up for disappointment here. What's wrong with me?
Yeah, I mean, Opta Supercomputer is saying 76.2%. Those are good, mate. Come on, hold on to it, Nick. Hold on to the dream. But Paul, you've been covering the club since they're in League One, and I wonder where you saw that transition from, I guess, when Marinakis took over to where they are now. Did you get a sense of that journey that actually this is exactly where he wants to be as an owner of a club like this, and actually this is the level of ambition that he wanted to execute?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mean in any way to diminish any achievement that Forest have had at all, but I think the defining moment of their turnaround was when they appointed Steve Cooper. At that point, they were fighting a battle against relegation, and he was absolutely the right man at exactly the right time. He took a team that was devoid of confidence, that didn't have a plan, that didn't have an identity, that looked bound for League One, and turned them into a group of players that had belief, that had unity, that had togetherness, all core values that Nuno relies on as well, and has done well to keep going and to enhance even. But Steve Cooper was the man. Steve Cooper was the guy that turned it around. And I remember after promotion, after the playoff final, there was a big celebration at the Council House in Nottingham in the Market Square. And Evangelos Marinakis gave a short speech in which he said, "I want this team to be in Europe." And I think there was a certain amount of not sniggering, but I think people thought it would have been overly ambitious at that point for him to be talking in those terms. But do you know what? Here we are.
Yeah, Nick, it is a blessing that, regardless of whether or not a team or teams do come knocking for some of Forest's best players, is that they're in a really decent bargaining position. I mean, how many of those players who've followed this team to this point wouldn't want to be playing in the Champions League next season? I mean, it's not as if many of these players might want to leave, because this is the first time in a long time Forest are back in the big time.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that there might be some players who could, if they're particularly kind of career-minded, maybe they will think that they can parlay this into kind of a move to a club that are playing in the Champions League every season, for example. And there presumably will be a point where someone will come along with an amount of money that makes it impossible for us to turn down a bid for a Murillo or Gibbs White or whoever it is. But yeah, I mean the prospect of playing in the Champions League with Forest is, it might be that if Forest had finished ninth or whatever this season and not got into Europe, then some of those players might have thought, well, great, I've done really well this season, I'm going to get my big move. But being in the Champions League with Forest might just persuade them to stay on for an extra season. So if they could do that, then that would be excellent.
Okay, before we leave, I just want to put you in a little quandary, the two of you. Obviously, the FA Cup is still on the card, something that Brian Clough couldn't deliver. Do Forest take FA Cup glory or Champions League qualification? What are we saying, Paul?
Me personally, I'd go for the I'd go for the FA Cup because I'm kind of old school, and I think it's been so long since they last won it that I think it'd just be something that fans would always remember. Brian Clough never managed to do it, and he won just about everything else going, including those famous European Cups. I think if they win the FA Cup, the other thing is that it also gets Forest into the Europa League as well. So there'd still be a European adventure of sorts, and you'd get this historic day at Wembley where you would, at the end of the day, end up with, Morgan Gibbs-White, probably, maybe Ryan Yates, lifting a trophy. And that for years for Forest has seemed like something that's improbable. I don't think there's been many seasons in recent years where Forest fans started the season thinking we could win a trophy. And that's the reality here. They could. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, or I'm not taking it for granted, but they have a chance of winning a trophy. And I don't think that should be overlooked. I think, in 20 years' time, they'd look back on an FA Cup win more fondly than they would on qualifying for the Champions League.
Nick, I know you. Unrealistic fan. You want both, don't you? You think Forest can do it all.
Well, I mean, as we've established earlier, Forest are already 100% in the Champions League, so it's just a question of whether I want the FA Cup as well.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
what a lovely bonus, eh?
Yeah. I will take them both, please. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and whoever's dog it is in the background, trust me, they're excited about this. Is that yours, Paul? I love it. Honestly, gents, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it, Paul, Nick, and also Ahmed, who joined us earlier as well. And also thank you guys for watching as well. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And why not comment below with your thoughts? We love hearing from you. Thanks for now. We're back soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.